It's also a Squawk Exploratory Committee doubleheader this morning. Our next candidate is well known on the Hill for his stance on the Fed and monetary policy, but today he'll be talking about why he thinks he should be the next president of the United States. Representative Ron Paul joins us right now from Texas. And Congressman, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about what distinguishes you from the rest of the candidates who are out there seeking the Republican nomination?
Well, I think it's my precise understanding of how the free market works and why we should have a free market. Everybody talks about free enterprise, but it usually means government intervention one way or the other, principally in the monetary system. So I believe in free markets, and that means a different type of a monetary system. That means the regulatory system is done by different means other than the bureaucracy. And I'm very precise about the Constitution, about a limited definition of what the General Welfare Clause means and the Interstate Commerce Clause means and the Necessary and Proper Clause. And I think I'm known for taking a definition there quite different than the other candidates.
Why don't we talk specifically point by point? When it comes to some of the entitlements that are out there that have been passed even recently, you think some of them should be repealed, specifically the health care plan.
The one, I guess you're talking about the Ryan plan.
No, I'm sorry. I'm referring to Obama's health care plan that was passed.
Obama's health care plan. Well, the truth is we should have never engaged in this mess because they're all bankrupt. I mean, Social Security and Medicare is totally bankrupt. And at the rate we're going, they're not going to function once you have enough inflation that you can't print enough money, because the more you print, the more the prices go up. And that's why we're in a dilemma. So I would try to work our way out of it. And I don't like the attempt so far by the Republicans because it's sort of tokenism and it doesn't touch anything in the military-industrial complex and our military presence around the world. And to ignore that is ignoring a big reality about how great empires come down because they engage themselves too much around the world. But I think we should work our way out of it if we could. We should cut. But you know, when Obamacare was coming up, I like the slogan that they want the right to opt out. And I think we should. But shouldn't we have a right to opt out of Medicare? Shouldn't we have a right to opt out of the prescription drug programs that Republicans pushed? I want to opt out, and that means that people should have a chance to go on their own and get their deductions, get these medical savings accounts. That's the way we should be going, not making the bureaucracy bigger and demanding and forcing everybody into the system. That just what it does is it raises prices. It does not increase quality of medical care.
Do you agree with Congressman Ryan's plan?
Well, not really. I didn't vote for it, mainly because I didn't think it did hardly anything. But I give him some credit for at least trying. But look at the grief he's sustained because he made a little effort and he didn't touch anybody over 55. And all we heard was hysteria. And that to me is what we should expect, because the cuts aren't going to come, because those who are going to get the cuts are going to distort and demagogue it, and people are going to get angry. And this is exactly what has happened. So that's why I'm not predicting that we're going to resolve this. It's going to be resolved with a major crisis in this country, a lot worse than what we had in 2008, because I think we're already seeing the building of this crisis, and that is prices are going up, and governments don't know what to do about that. The only thing they resort to are wage and price controls, and France is already talking about it. So that's what the demagogues will resort to, and if they don't understand why prices go up, they always blame profiteering and speculators. Never do they say to the Fed, you're printing too much money, the money is losing value, that's why prices are going up. So I think we're in for big trouble, and that's why the cuts probably won't happen, and we better prepare ourselves for some very bad times and know what we want. If we know we want freedom and free markets and sound money, let's prepare for it, because that is the answer. It's not manipulating the regulators and just think of how many more regulations we've put on. Republicans and Democrats have done this over the past 10 years, whether it's Sarbanes-Oxley or whether it's the bill we just passed, the reform bills on financial services. I mean, that's all they can do is they print more money and they regulate more. And how are we going to raise taxes? And that inevitably will just delay the recovery and drive us into a very severe inflationary period.
Although, Congressman, I think there's a lot of confusion as to what happened during the financial crisis, whether the Fed and the Treasury were helping things out by making sure that the entire financial system didn't collapse. And I think when people look back at it, there are many people who say, looking back, they needed to do what they were doing at the time. Now, right now is a very different time. And Paul Volcker over the weekend himself said that he thinks the Fed needs to be raising rates sometime soon. But do you distinguish between what happened then and where we stand right now?
Well, I have trouble doing that because I thought what they were doing was absolutely wrong. They were saying they were saving the financial system. They saved some Wall Streeters and some bankers, but the devastation came because the jobs were gone and the mortgages couldn't be paid and the people lost their homes. So they didn't solve any problems. And the people who were making a lot on when the bubble was being formed, they got bailed out. So other than the fact that we're continuing the process, yes, printing more money won't help, but tinkering with the interest rates, like all of a sudden the central banks or Paul Volcker is smart enough to know what the interest rate should be. I mean, why have we given up on the free market? We don't want price controls. Most people, that aren't even with me on the monetary system, they understand that price controls are very, very bad. It causes shortages and it causes an underground economy.
But
as soon as it comes to price controls on money.
But I'm sorry, raising rates and rolling off what the Fed has on its balance sheet right now would be a way to tighten the monetary policy. You don't think that's a good idea either?
Yeah, no. Well, I think they're tinkering and they are pretending that they know. And how can they sell worthless assets? We don't even know what they're worth. Nobody would buy them. That's why the Fed had to buy them. So who wants to buy them at market value? And does anybody know what the market value is to buy all these mortgage derivatives and everything that the Fed bought? Yeah. No, that stuff needs to be liquidated. If you don't liquidate it and you float around, we'll be doing exactly what they've done in Japan and what we tried to do and prolong the Depression of the 30s. So, no, it needs liquidated. And it will be liquidated, but Bernanke believes it should be liquidated by bad money so that if they have a lot of debt, if we owe $14 trillion, if we could just get up to 50% inflation over the next 5 years, we'll only owe half as much. So they're in the business of liquidating, and they're in the business of defaulting. That's where the problem is. They say, oh, we better raise the debt limit or we'll default. Well, we're constantly defaulting. Every time a person goes to the store and the price of food goes up and gasoline goes up, they'll say, they're defaulting. They devalued the currency. So it's only a question on how you default, and I don't favor, the default that we're going through now because it's sticking it to the middle class.
Congressman, whenever you're on, we get lots of mail, and you definitely have a really zealous following, but it's probably not enough to get the nomination or to win the presidency. And it's always good to have this podium to get your views out, and we understand that. But what do you have to do to get more mainstream, to actually become a viable candidate to win the highest office in the land?
Well, I happen to think I'm mainstream. I think the country is way out of whack. Republican Party has spent too much money. So I would think a balanced budget is pretty mainstream. I would think not printing money when you need it is pretty mainstream. I think freedom is mainstream. And the people are coming. Compared to 4 years ago, I mean, it's unbelievably different for me because the people are moving to the position of being mainstream and looking at what our traditions have been. Free markets and sound money and property rights and contract rights, down with the bureaucracy, a sensible foreign policy where we don't have this horrendous foreign welfare to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars and wars that go on for 10 years. That isn't mainstream. That's craziness.
But
that's not part of what we were about.
How do you get to those numbers, though, with, I don't know, how do you become better known? How do you get to those numbers that could actually make you, help you win the Republican nomination to actually go, then take on President Obama?
Of course, the numbers are growing all the time, but it is a very real question. But I wouldn't be surprised if my numbers are better right now than at this time when Bill Clinton became president. Of course, things can change. They can change rapidly. Most people are anticipating that there's somebody else going to get in the race and all of a sudden explode to the top of the pack. So this business that I only have 10 or 15%, depending on which poll it is, doesn't hold a whole lot of water. The question is, am I offering answers that are different and the people are ready for them? Am I mainstream? I happen to think I am. I just think $14 trillion of debt. And, you know, our obligation this year is going up $5 trillion. What is mainstream about that? And I attack that. Matter of fact, I've been voting against that stuff for 30 years. I went into Congress in the 70s because I said, once you remove the restraints on the Fed to print money, they're going to print money and they're going to wreck this economy and the deficits will explode and eventually it'll quit. And that's where we are today.
How much time? Oh. Is there anything you're going to do in terms of campaign strategy that is different from 2008? Or are you just going to try to build on the name recognition that you built in that campaign?
No, I think we do the same thing, but just better because, you know, take Iowa, for instance. We went in and we did the same thing, but the number of people who volunteered to be organizers were slim pickings. Today, we have literally hundreds of people because we've stayed in touch with them in the past 4 years. So our volunteers and our organization is so much stronger. And what we're achieving up in New Hampshire is so much different. When the Speaker of the House wanted somebody to come and open up his leadership pack, he invited me to come. So before, you know, it was exclusion. I would be excluded from debates and ignored. That's not happening today. When I go to Republican Party meetings now, yes, all of a sudden they look like one of our rallies. Our people have gone and joined the Republican Party. So it's a difference of night and day. And matter of fact, the supporters are getting rather excited about it all.
Let me ask you, Congressman, you said you've been warning about what's happening right now for 30 years since you joined Congress. How much time do you think we have left?
Well, it depends. If you're saying how much time does our republic have left, I would say we don't have much left of our republic. I mean, what they're doing. I mean, just think of what's happened to our Fourth Amendment and all, and the monetary system. How much time do we have left before we have a cataclysmic economic event much worse than 08? I think a couple of years. That's one thing in Austrian economics. It's very precise that you don't predict timing because it has a lot of psychology and emotionalism behind it, and you can't predict events, but you can predict direction. You can predict when a bubble is being formed and the bubble must burst, and you can predict that inflation will come and prices will rise, and you can predict recessions will come, but exactly timing. But you ask a question and it's only a guess, and I only do it because you asked, but I think in 2 or 3 years it's going to be very, very clear to the American people that the problem is that the dollar is not worth much anymore. You know, today you mentioned about the stock market going up, but the stock market, you know, goes up, but does it have more value to it? Well, when the dollar goes down in purchasing power, I mean, your stocks aren't really going up. I mean, if you bought stocks back in the year 2000, you're not, and just, you know, back then they were saying buy and hold, buy and hold. Well, anybody that did that's way behind right now because the stocks may be about where they were, but they don't have purchasing power. We've lost a lot of purchasing power. That's what people have to realize, that what we're doing is destroying the purchasing power of the dollar, and it's going to be very, very devastating. And under those circumstances, people get frightened, just like they did in 2008. Whatever is necessary, bail them out, print $3 trillion if necessary. But the governments are notorious in scaring people. They work on fear, whether it's economics or foreign policy. Just like Saddam Hussein's about ready to attack us with a nuclear weapon. They got to build fear into people so that they can undermine our liberties. And right now, that is our greatest threat, the undermining of our personal liberties.
All right, Congressman Paul, we want to thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.